No, Catherine. I can't see Catherine. I think she just saw her chat if she was able to see us, but no.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, it's a lot better.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I think you asked me something, Mary.
Oh yeah. How would you like me to pronounce your name? Like, how should I pronounce your name?
Oh, you can call me Meena.
Meena, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking. Thanks.
Everybody, thank you so much for joining us for October's Diversability Unplugged, Disability in Tech. My name is Marie Deschanel Lewis, and I'm carrying a Black ableism. I'm joining right now from the Blue Ridge Mountains in Roanoke, Virginia. And I am the content administrator at Diversability. Diversity is a community of people with disabilities and people support us who are all on the same mission of elevating disability pride together. We are celebrating National Disability Employment Awareness Month with a powerhouse panel discussion with 4 disabled leaders who are blazing trails in the tech world. As the Bureau of Labor projects over 500,000 new jobs will be added to the tech industry by 2029, the industry really has the power to make a difference when it comes to employing disabled people. Tonight, I'm joined by Aubrie from Ad Hoc, Meena from Microsoft, Aubrie from Google, and Derek, a member of the Diversability Leadership Collective with varied experience in the tech industry. And they're here tonight to share a little about their journeys as disabled pioneers in the tech world. If you have any questions during the conversation, drop them in the chat, and we're going to get to them at the end of the discussion. We're going to start with introductions. And so please introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself, and don't forget to describe yourself for us. And we'll start with you, Aubrie. This is Marie. I'm done speaking.
Hi everyone, I'm Aubrie, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. I use she, her pronouns, and as an image description, I'm a Chinese American woman. I have long dark hair. I'm wearing a gray sweater, and in the background is a charcoal drawing of a violin that I actually drew a long time ago. A bit more about myself. I have a form of muscular dystrophy, and as a result, I am mobility impaired, hearing impaired, and speech impaired. So I joke that it is 3 disabilities and a type of 1. I studied engineering at Stanford and now work as a marketer at Google. And very nice to be here.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. It's so great to have you learn a little bit about all of your experience and everything that you've done. Next, we'll go.
My turn. Sorry about that. My name is Ovi. I go with he, him pronouns. I am a rather large man with a full beard. Behind me is my work background, which is green with white text. I'm on the autism spectrum. With minimal supports in most instances. I also have audio processing disorder as well as ADHD. And so if it takes me a couple seconds to respond, it's probably my brain just processing, has a little bit of lag. But I'm a software engineer with Ad Hoc. I specialize in cloud and cloud infrastructure. But I'm generally a jack of all trades. I've been in a few industries from health tech to insurance to private aviation, doing the entire stack. So I have a bit of experience with everything.
Thank you so much, Avi. Next, we'll go to Meena. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to meet you all. My name is Meena. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft. I'm a brown-skinned woman with dark black hair. And my pronouns are she and her. I'm a person with a speech impairment, or specifically a stutter, and I'm so glad to be here. Yeah, thank you.
We're so glad to have you. Thank you so much for being here. And last but not least, Derek.
Hey everybody, my name is Derek. I am a white male with medium-ish brown hair and a goatee beard kind of thing. Wearing a blue hoodie, the red shirt underneath, and a brick wall behind me as my background. I use he, him pronouns. And let's see, I work in the industry as a user experience designer, which is essentially a kind of a design strategist, where the metaphor that I like to use is for like architects kind of draw the blueprints for a house or a building, and then pass that off to contractors who then the house gets designed and all that kind of stuff, like into the interior. So I work more as like an architect who draws blueprints for technology, applications, websites, apps, all kinds of anything that is a product or a service digitally, really. I've worked in the industry I just passed a 20-year anniversary. It's my first job in tech. I started in tech pre-disability. I had a stroke when I was 19, and that rendered me half blind in both eyes, which is a hemanopsia, and the left side of my body was completely paralyzed, and now it's partially paralyzed. I gained some function back. So my left hand is non-functional from left arm, from the elbow down. My left leg is weak, and my left vision is gone as well. So I've worked primarily as a contractor over the years. So I've worked at a lot of different places. It would be a lot to list, but everywhere from Amazon to Disney to Verizon to Sony, on all kinds of small, medium, large, global clients for 20 years. So that's me.
That's awesome. You just led perfectly into our first question, which is, what is your role in the tech industry? And it really sounds like your renaissance really has had such a vast experience that I can't wait to hear everything that you've learned. So we'll lead right into that question. What is your experience in the tech industry, and why is your work so meaningful to you? We'll start with you, Ovidio.
So I've worked with some really small startups and some very large companies. I've worked at a 20-person startup all the way up to $100,000 employee company. And right now I work at Ad Hoc. And the reason I joined Ad Hoc is because they help federal government agencies better serve people. And so we work with agencies to improve their digital services by designing and building applications that meet people's needs. And I specifically joined because I really believe in helping people, and I see that the work that I do has a very clear impact. Currently, I'm working with an organization called the PAN Foundation, and they provide grant money and transportation money for people who have disabilities and illnesses to provide for their care. And so the work that we do has a very real impact on people's lives, and yeah.
That's awesome. It's safe to say the tech industry really allows you to make an impact where otherwise you wouldn't be able to.
Correct. Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, being in the tech industry allows me to have a multiplicative impact, right? So instead of being able to help one person directly, I'm able to help thousands of people with the code that I write or the infrastructure that I put in place.
Wow, that is just so powerful. Aubrie, I would love to hear with you, why is your work so meaningful to you, and what do you do in the tech industry?
Thank you. So similar to what Ovi was saying, the tech industry has so much power over people's lives. And the way I see it, the power and purpose of technology is to expand what people can do. So the people who can benefit the most from technology are disabled people. Yet I feel that the tech industry is not focusing on us. So I see my role in this industry as being an activist and making sure that people don't ignore us, don't forget about us. So even though I studied engineering, that is not my full-time job at Google. I am in marketing at Google. But another of my positions inside Google is I am the president of Google's Disability Alliance Employee Resource Group. And I think that, so we're talking about Disability Employment Awareness Month. And I think part of that employment awareness is not just about hiring, not just about making sure that a company's workplace is diverse, but that disabled people have power and have a voice once they get there. So that is a significant part of how I see my role in the industry, is making sure that companies don't forget about us.
That's amazing, because it really goes back down to that phrase, nothing without us. It used to be nothing about us without us, but I've heard some people saying not just about us, nothing without us, period.
Yes. What I like to say is nothing about us without us, and nothing without us at all.
Exactly. And it's like just having these roles to where you have that representation, it's so much more than just a job. And so I really appreciate your perspective, and thank you so much for sharing. Meena, I would love to hear next from you about why your work's so meaningful.
Sure. So I'm a software engineer and I just started 2-3 months back. So it's more recent. So I think the one of the things that I want to share is that, so my software engineering role, it's not focused strictly on accessibility, but at the same time, through my work in just software engineering, I've been trying to make the code we write more accessible. So, for example, I've been just trying to talk to my teammates to make sure that they consider writing accessible code from the start, rather than waiting at the end or to fix the accessibility problems on your code. So I think what I just want to share is that even though and your main job on the tech field, it's like not directly connected to accessibility, you can take these small steps to make sure that the product or the service you're working on, it is accessible. So I guess these are the small ways I've been trying to make an impact the tech field. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just have to say before we move on that it's not just small ways that makes an impact, because the fact that there are people in the tech field that understand accessibility should never be the afterthought. It needs to be fully integrated in everything we do. That's the way we're going to dismantle the ableist society. So it's not just a small step. That's like a massive leap, and it's critical to, I think, everything that we do. So thank you for all that you do. And next, Derek, we talked a little bit about what you do in the tech industry, but you never mentioned about what it really means to you and why your work is so meaningful. So I want to touch on that a little bit before we move on.
Sure. Well, it's many reasons, but I mean, I started my career so long ago, like right out of high school. I didn't go to college. I don't have a degree, because back then I graduated in class of 2000. The internet was still kind of new, and like not everybody had it, and it was still dial up, and it was still not a household thing for the whole world, and people didn't know if it was really going to stick around and take it. Some said it was bad, and the dot-com bubble burst, and I ended up teaching myself HTML, in junior high when I got my first computer. I was just fascinated by programming, and by the time I graduated high school, anybody and everybody who knew HTML back then could get a job. So I decided to just try and start working, and I did that. And then my first big job, which was working for Verizon, when they were a brand new company, that's how long ago it was, how old I am. I worked on their first version of Verizon.com, and while I was doing that, I had my stroke, and I didn't know if I'd ever work again. You know, like I lost half of my vision. I lost half of my body function wise. I'm not an amputee. I lost function of the left side of my body completely. I had to move back into my parents' house. I had to go on disability at my job. I didn't know if I'd ever get to go back. I didn't know if I'd be able to learn how to type with one hand, or if I'd get my other hand back, or, you know, if I'd be able to do programming and design work with half of my vision and do it successfully. And so then I spent several years, you know, learning to adapt and going through physical and occupational therapy, and found a way, you know, to adapt and do the work and get back to where I felt like I could contribute and not fall behind, and not need too many accommodations. And once I got back in and felt like I could do it and proved that I could, like, I never wanted to let it go. You know, that like I can have a job, you know, like I'm not, like my life isn't over, quote unquote, you know, because this happened, and I am going to be able to find my independence again. And the technology industry blew up, obviously, and I've been able to kind of ride that wave with it and grow with it. I mean, I was a kid and now I'm 40 years old almost. Like, so having this industry and having the work and having there's so many problems that technology solves for people like us, and it helps us be able to do things and use products and services, and like an Uber, because I couldn't drive for the longest time, you know, like Uber and Lyft and those kinds of services, that like those are technology services. I mean, they're ride sharing, but those kinds of things have enabled me to have work and also live. So I'm super passionate about the industry and what it can do, and that people with disabilities can get involved and have jobs in the industry and not, you know, not be relegated to feeling like they can't be a part. So that's my long-winded answer.
It was a great answer, and it's truly amazing to just think about how much technology has truly given us. I can't imagine living in a day and age without it. Just a reminder, we will have question and answers at the end. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and we will get to them towards the end of the event. Our next question is, when did you disclose your disability, if you have disclosed it? And why did you wait till then? Did you disclose it, for example, during the hiring process? Was it after you got the offer? And why? Ovidio, we'll go with you first. You're muted.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. I usually disclose after my first week of employment, just to make sure that I have the job. And that's usually because my experience has been when I disclose during the hiring process, people tend to have very, very narrow views of what autism is, right? And so it's very hard to break down those stereotypes or those biases before they even have a chance to know who I am and what I'm capable of. And so I found that for me, it works better to disclose after I've quote unquote proven myself, right? And so, yeah, kind of like Jacob was saying, right? Like, you hired me for my ability, right? Not for my disability. And so that's usually why I disclose after I'm hired.
Awesome. Next up, I'd love to hear from Aubrie on this.
Yeah, thank you. So, if I totally understand that and accept that, I will say that I had a little bit of a different approach. For me, disability is an integral part of my identity. So I had it on my resume. So I had on my resume that I had co-founded and had been the president of the disabled student group at Stanford. And that I was a fellow for Line Connect, which is a program for disabled students. So it was no secret that I was involved in the disability community, and that and then during the interview, I talked about my experience as someone who is disabled and who has had to fight for a place in every space that I enter. And I'm very fortunate that my interviewers and recruiters were understanding, and they appreciated how my story and my experience made me a better asset to the company. So it was on my resume.
I completely vibe with that so much. I'm the same way. Honestly, I have all of my advocacy work on my resume because I feel like I shouldn't be ashamed of it just because it has to do with disability. It's that shame and that's that fear that continues to allow the ableist society to thrive. But every person's personal belief about that, it's so personal because it's our livelihoods too. Like the discrimination in the workforce is extremely real. So it's like it's a rock and a hard place because we want to fight that ableism, but we need our jobs to survive. So it's like it's so hard. Meena, I would love to hear your perspective on this.
Sure. So for me, and I do disclose my stutter, the interviewing stage, because I do need accommodations for my stutter. So for example, I can share my experience interviewing with Microsoft. So when I got the interview from Microsoft, I did tell them that I do have a speech impairment. So
Yes, we're naked.
the kind of accommodations what I need is to have an option to both chat and speak at the same time. So if I do feel tired or to talk all the time, like I could still use the chat option. So so this was back like 2019. So the interviews, they were still in person. So they did for me is that both the interviewer and me, we share the same Google Doc. So I could just type in the doc and the interviewer, they could see what I typed at the same time. So this way, I didn't have to speak all the time and get tired. So yeah, it was great. And I got the job. So, but I do understand, I think not all companies, they are like Microsoft. So Microsoft, they already have a very good including hiring strategy. So they are like, I think, able to provide such accommodations, and they do understand, but at the same time, I feel that I think a lot of the smaller companies, they don't know about the accommodation process, and and they may discriminate. So I think it's a challenge for sure. Yeah, definitely.
It really is a challenge, but it's awesome to hear a major employer like Microsoft is being so accommodating and inclusive. I really think inclusive leadership is the key to the hiring process, making the interviews accessible like that. So it's awesome that you had that experience. And I love that you talked about accommodations, because that leads us into our next question of what has your employer done for accommodations and how did you start those conversations? Derek, we'll start this question off with you.
Yeah, so accommodations. I personally myself have, I guess everything happened to me so young. I was 19, like I said, and I guess I didn't start going back to work until I was 20. But I always tried to like be the quiet one and not like rock the boat too much. And for the record, my answer to the disclosure of disability is that it varies. For me, as a career-long contractor, I've had, like, my LinkedIn list of jobs is long because sometimes it's a month-long project, sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's 6 months. And so I work, and I move places, and I do interviews all the time, and it varies on when I disclose and to who and how and why, and but so in the case of places I've worked where I had disclosed, they did know. There have been a few things that I think I wrote down, a couple things. Like one in particular was like flexible hours, and working with my employer to get my like arrival time to work, because I wasn't driving and I was only relying on public transit. And sometimes I would miss a bus, or the bus would break down, or the bus would not be running that day for whatever reason. I live in Los Angeles, and traffic here is crazy, and public transit is surprisingly good. It's just not always reliable. And so I talked to my manager up front. Hey, just to let you know, I'm visually impaired. I can't drive. I don't have a car. I take the bus and the train or an Uber or a Lyft sometimes. And even this is before Uber and Lyft existed, I couldn't tell them that. So my ability to guarantee I could be there at 9 or 10 or whatever time was kind of hit or miss. And so for the most part, managers were understanding and like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Like, like if you're going to show up a little later, maybe you can stay a little later. And there's ways to like kind of work with your employer about the accommodations you need. The conversations I've had have always been very civil, and they weren't like, what are you talking about? like why do you need this? You don't need this. There was no anger or anything like that. One time I had to I'm blind on the left side, and I was put in an office where it was an open office floor plan where everybody was on my left side, but I'm blind on my left side. And then there was a wall on my right side. And so when there's a wall on my right side and everything's on my left side that I can't see and I'm blind to it, I felt like I was sitting in a little box, and like I didn't know what was going on, and people would come over to me on my left side and wonder why I was ignoring them. And have to tap me on the shoulder, and I'm like scared. So I had to have a conversation with my boss, like maybe we could find me another desk where I'm facing the other direction so that I don't feel like I'm not sitting in the office with everybody or like I'm sitting against a wall. And he totally understood, and a couple other people in the office like rearranged so that I could arrange, and it was not a big deal. But and even trivial one, when I worked at Amazon, they had like water coolers on every floor, and you had to like push it a certain way with like have your glass under the little spout where the water comes out, and then push the button, but the little ledge for the glass to go under wasn't big enough for a cup to sit there. And I only have one hand to use, so I couldn't hold the cup and push the button at the same time for the water cooler. And everybody drinks water all day, and I'm like, I don't want to have to ask somebody to get me water. So maybe we can find if there's another type of water cooler around that we could use that maybe would be. And it was like so trivial, and I felt so stupid for asking. But the HR lady who managed the situation like was just so like, thank you for bringing this up, and we're so glad. Like we don't know these things, we don't see these things. Like it's so nice to know that, you know, we can do something that can help you just with something as simple as getting water. So those are all kinds of, it's so many different ways and things that can happen. But generally for me, it's all been very positive, and I haven't had any negative experiences with accommodations.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that you haven't had any negative experiences, because that makes it a little easier on us when we're able to ask. And before I move on to the next person, I just have to say, what may seem like trivial, like it may seem trivial just to get water, but it's like that's a human need. We need to be hydrated, you know? And if we're unable to get to the water cooler, if we're unable to access that water, it's like we're deprived of a basic human necessity just because of the unintentional exclusion. So I think it's awesome that you brought that up to their attention, and you know they're probably going to remember that beyond the time that you're in the workplace, because when we explain the accommodations and the reason we need them, it doesn't just impact us, but hopefully our employers will remember it moving forward. So moving on, I would love to hear about any accommodations and how you asked for them. Ovidio?
Yeah, so I have some, part of my autism, I have a diagnosis of audio processing disorder. And the best way that I can describe it is like most people, when they focus on listening on something, it's like a car radio, right? Where you go from one station to another. But for me, it's like I hear everything all the same at the same time on the same level. And so it's really hard sometimes to pay attention to things that are going on. And so usually one of my accommodations is like, hey, could I have noise canceling headphones, right? And thankfully I've been in the industry for a while, so I have like a slew of them now. But that was one of the bigger things that was really hard to get when I first started, because most of my employers had like an open floor plan, which, you know, especially in like 2015, people were like, why are you wearing headphones? Like, that's disrespectful, or you're not paying attention. Why are you just watching YouTube videos? Like, why are you doing any work, right? And the places that I was able to get the headphones, like my ability to focus skyrocketed because I wasn't distracted by, you know, the water cooler that's 15 feet away and somebody's dripping water in it, or, you know, somebody that's playing a YouTube video in the other room. So that's probably one of the big ones that I usually ask for. Hold on, I do have some notes. And then one of the other ones that I didn't actually, I guess I just gotten used to this, like going into the office, but being remote, especially since my company now, Ad Hoc, is fully remote and they've been since inception, has drastically changed how I work, right? Because I'm also diagnosed with ADHD, and so being able to focus is difficult. And at the same time, like I'm really good at focusing just at random times during the day. And so I can hyper focus and I can get hours of work done in an hour because I'm just in the zone for it. but it might take me 8 hours to get to that point, right? Or 2 days to get there. And so one of the nice things about being remote is like, there are flexible hours, right? There's not really like a, hey, you have to come and clock in at 9 to 5. And so that's also been very, very helpful. And one of the reasons that I'm at the company that I'm at now.
Oh, I think remote work is probably the silver lining from the pandemic. Just the fact that now it's so accessible that honestly, companies don't really have an excuse if they don't have a remote strategy anymore. Next, I would love to hear about how you went for asking for accommodations and if you experienced any stigma when you asked for yours.
Thank you. So Derek had talked about something as simple as getting water. And Marie, you pointed out, this is a human need. It's a basic need. Well, another basic need is using the bathroom. And that's something that I need help with because of my muscular dystrophy. So I need help moving from my wheelchair and back into my wheelchair. And when I started at Google, there was no accommodation for personal care attendants. And so what do I do? It means I don't drink water at work. Right? At that time, and then I'd have to dehydrate myself. This is a story that every wheelchair user with muscular dystrophy knows already. And so at some point, a group of us with neuromuscular disabilities at Google got together and we advocated for a personal care attendant program. And it took a while, but eventually Google did implement that. And for us, that was revolutionary. And I find it a bit sad that being able to go to the bathroom is a revolutionary thing, but that is how, that's how it is. But that is part of what I mean when I say I had to fight for my place in every space that I enter. Derek, I'm so glad that, and for others, I'm so glad when HR team are very accommodating and they say, sure, what you need, we can do that. But sometimes it takes more advocacy, more pressure, more of many disabled employees getting together and realizing it's not just me who has this problem and has this access problem. I feel like even if it was just one disabled employee who needs that accommodation, an employer should give that accommodation. But for anyone out there who is trying to advocate for more accommodation, you might have better luck if you get together and advocate as a group. So that was, I had many other stories about accommodation, but that was the biggest one. And I wish that more companies had this, that I had an acquaintance, a friend who had the same diagnosis as me, and she had to cross the street to use the bathroom in a different building because the one in her building is not accessible. So it's very sad to me that we are not getting our basic needs met in the workplace, outside the workplace. But I am excited for a future in which we can take access for granted.
Yeah, it really is sad that it's 2021 and there are people who can't even use the bathroom at work still. That just breaks my heart. It's like, an inclusive workplace isn't inclusive until it's accessible to the disabled. And if people can't use the bathroom, if they can't be able to drink water, get their human needs met, it's not accessible. Meena, moving on, I would love to hear about if you've ever experienced any stigma in your career and how have you handled it if you did?
Sure. So I think a lot of times, like in my college career, so I just graduated 2 months back. So I don't think I'm too far into my career yet, but I think in my college career, a lot of people they somehow thought that since my speech it's not fluent, it's like somehow related to me not knowing things that well, but it's not true. I think people, they should pay more attention on like what I'm planning to say rather than how I'm saying it. So I think it's these small things when, I mean, not a small thing, but it's just that when some people, they try to make assumption about your skills and your smartness just because of the way you speak. I think that's like one of the stigma like I've faced for sure.
I thought I clicked on mute. That has to be really frustrating, and I'm so sorry you have to experience that. And I just want to echo what you said of people listening to what you're going to say instead of how you're saying it, because it's like what we say, it matters, and it doesn't matter how it's being said. So I think it's like when it comes to feeling that in the workplace, it's awesome that you just keep existing there and making sure that you're heard. And so our next question is, how can corporations that run the tech world engage in better allyship towards the disabled? Ovidio, we'll start with you.
I feel like this is a really big question that we could do like a whole series on just by itself. But like my 2 cents on it for a quick thing is like I feel like there's a general feeling in corporations that like, oh, if you're anything but the norm, if you're anything but capable, right, you're a burden. And so we don't want to put in the time, we don't want to put in the effort because that's going to take away from our bottom line or whatever BS reason may be, right? And what I think a lot of corporations and the people who run them miss on is somebody in the chat actually pointed this up. Most people that I've met that are disabled in some way are some of the most resilient people because we have to be, right? Like we have to be resilient to just survive and to thrive. And so not implementing those accommodations, which most of them are fairly easy, right? Like a water cooler replacement or some headphones, like pretty trivial things in the grand scheme of things that would not only allow this employee to better function, right, or better fulfill their role, but they'll allow them to also, carry over that conversation with other people and allow them to have those discussions about like awareness with their coworkers. And so I think it's a disservice to not I'd even ask, right? But I think not being willing to even have the discussion or to even do the minimum is having the discussion and like asking the questions. That's the minimum that you can do as a corporation, right? Like, and providing the accommodations is the next step. I don't make it sound really simple, but right, like that's the basis of it, I think.
Yeah, honestly, the basic thing they could do is make it an environment where disabled people can thrive, and that's providing accommodations, having these conversations. Derek, I would love to hear what you think about how corporations that run the tech industry can be better allies.
Yeah, I think first, I think it would be helpful or more helpful for more companies to make it feel like it's okay to disclose that you have a disability. Not everybody's disabilities are visible. And mine are sometimes visible, sometimes not. Sometimes I'm a part-time wheelchair user, sometimes white cane user. And I know that in the past, when I've been looking for jobs or interviewing for jobs, filling out applications for jobs, some companies actually put on there, if you need accommodations, please let us know. We're happy to, like the language, the tone that companies use towards people with disabilities is more inviting and less threatening. I think that's a huge thing, which maybe that's part of like marketing your company, I guess, like that they can just take a position of more like, we want to include people like you, and which can trickle all the way or go up, not trickle down, but go up to like out in the world, and these companies can represent more disabled people in their company advertising and all that kind of stuff. I think when you see that companies like Microsoft, like with Nina, have all kinds of adaptive technology applications that they've developed and that they actually put advertising out around those, it makes me feel like, wow, that looks like a place that I could actually work. And that if I reached out to them, they wouldn't be like, why are you contacting us? Like they would see that as like, we have a place for you. Like how cool is that? Like, so I think just having that general sense of like welcomeness and warmness towards disabilities would be great. And then also like Aubrie, it sounded like created, I think what Amazon called affinity groups within the company. Create, like she mentioned, kind of gathering the troops and I think companies having more community within the company for people with disabilities. Like I've worked at so many places where people that I worked with didn't know I had disabilities. I didn't know people that I worked with had disabilities. If there was like an actual initiative where it was like, hey, like we can get you guys together, and you guys can also do like teach outs to the rest of the people who aren't necessarily wouldn't identify as having a disability, but would love to hear your stories and understand your experiences and engage with you. Because a lot of people, it turns out, are very timid about asking or feel uncomfortable and that kind of thing. I think companies internally can enable people that they've already hired that they may not even know have disabilities to speak out and then kind of organize, you know. Just there needs to be more hiring of people like us, too, is a great way to get to that, having a group, and banding together with coworkers. If you found out that there was an executive in your company that, if I found out, had a vision impairment, I'd be so excited to go like talk to him, but like, and swap stories and share laughs and, and fight the good fight for accommodations and all that. So, so many different things that can be done, but that's a few what I think.
You said so many great things. We're actually going to touch on the last part of your statement after we get to Aubrie about how companies can be better allies. Real quick, I wanted to say, can you imagine if like tech giants would like boost the algorithm for like disabled creators, and like if they would actually like have paid ads of disabled creators and just hire disabled creators? Like there's so much power, and that would really add to the representation. So Aubrie, I would love to hear what you think that companies can do to really be better allies.
Thank you. Yeah, and I love the idea about amplifying disabled community. And I love what everyone here has said. I'll tell you a bit of a story. I'm not sure how many of you have been in listening sessions. So I've been in a lot of listening sessions where people in the company expect to show up and be handed the answer and handed their life story and the solution on a silver platter, and to not actually do any work themselves. So how can tech companies be better allies? Do your research. And it's been written about, it's been talked about. Right? And I'll put this in the chat. This is because I would like to move on from having the same conversation over and over. I think we have to have those conversations, yes. But let's keep moving those conversations forward instead of getting caught up on the same problems that we have had for 10 years. So my advice on how to be an ally: come to us with ideas, come to us with solutions, do your homework, and then we can be the advisors and consultants and the decision makers, as opposed to once again having to solve all the problems ourselves while we are already at a disadvantage.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for sharing. Before we get to our Q&A, we have one last question. What impact does disability representation and employment in the tech world have on the wider world? We'll start with you, Meena.
Sure. I'm gonna try to think about this. So I think I think one of the main things is that the technology, it's just so widespread now. I think everything is so powered by the technology that do not have disability representation, and that it just would be so sad. I think when you do see somebody like you of the same kind of a disability like you, using the same kind of accessible technology, it just feels so good and so empowering. I like remember at like one of hackathon that we did some time back. They tried to make like the accessible version of a very popular video game for kids. And the first thing, like it was sad that the game, it was like not made accessible from the start, but they made an accessible version later on. So I just seeing those disabled kids trying to play that accessible game, I think, and like they just felt really happy. So I think everything starting from gaming to work onto transportation, I think everything is just powered by tech. So it is just so crucial that we make all these experiences powered by tech accessible to everybody. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Meena. Real quick, I would love to get Ovidio's perspective on what disabled representation in the tech world would mean for the wider world, and then we're going to get to our question and answer segment.
So I think that the impact of disability representation in employment is kind of like Meena was saying. It's very dramatic for especially for younger people, right? Like I've had conversations with younger autistic people, and within the autistic community, there's a very low employment rate, and so just having conversations with younger autistic people that are in middle school and high school, and just being that representation of like, hey, I have a full-time job, I live independently, like even if you live independently, like there is a future for you, there is a life for you other than, you know, being shunned or pushed aside. And so it's very, very dramatic and impactful for the young people. And I think on the wider world, when we can accept people who have disabilities, or we have, you know, accommodations or need accommodations, and when, like Meena and Aubrie were saying, when we include that into the design and the original design, not after the fact, right? Or not like, oh, we need to add this in because we have an employee who needs this thing. But when we are inclusive from the start, it not only benefits, you know, us who specifically need those accommodations, but it makes life easier for everybody, right? Like being kinder to people makes life easier, and it doesn't really. Being kind takes a lot of forms, but I think one of the things that I've noticed from disability representation is like showing kindness actually is very impactful for everybody else.
Well said. And it's honestly easy to show kindness. You don't have to really go out of your way to be kind to somebody. So now we're going to start with our question and answer segment. And our first question is, what is one thing that you would like hiring managers to do to be a better ally for disabled candidates? We will start with you, Derek. What is one thing?
I think, I guess I kind of maybe am repeating my answer from earlier, but I think just a general openness and warmness and tone around if there's anything we can do or that you might need, and maybe even sharing in some way, because I know it might not come up in conversation generally for people that like, oh, and by the way, we have a persons with disabilities affinity group here at our company, you know. But if that were part of like some of the materials you got leading up to an interview, or that you could find accessible on a company's website about their like value principles and things of that nature, like I think just that general kind of like acknowledgement in a warm, kind, open way to like feel like this is a place where I feel like they'll see me, hear me, and talk to me and let me get involved, you know? I think that's a great start. I mean, there are other like technical things I think that could be done too. I mean, obviously like providing the kinds of accommodations or being flexible and being able to talk about those flexibilities, which like you were saying, working from home now has changed the game completely. Fortunately, as a contractor for most of my career, I've done a lot of work from home over the last 20 years. Probably like 70% of my work has been from home. That even just being more open and like about what that means for people, and that like that opens jobs up to so many millions more people that might never be able to make it into an office. You know, I mean, I couldn't drive for the longest time, and it was so difficult for me to get to offices. There were jobs I had to turn down that I like was really interested in because it's just a place I had always thought about working, but it's too far to get to on public transit. You know, like it would take me 2.5 hours in the morning to get there when it would be like 30 minutes by car. So being able to find that HR and the application process and interview process is just more like when they talk about that as a general perk or benefit to the general masses, that they can maybe squeak in some verbiage and conversation about what that might mean for people who may need something more specific, you know, and like, hey, isn't this great? We offer flexible work hours. It's like, maybe we could say, you know, like if you have a need for a flexible schedule for any specific reason other than just generally you want that, then we're happy to talk about it. We're not gonna like throw your resume out because you're asking for this, like some kind of assurances that we're cool with people like you know.
Right. It would be awesome if we didn't have to worry about our resume going in the trash as soon as they found out our dirty little secret that we were disabled. One day. Aubrie, I would love to know what's one thing that you would love from hiring managers for them to do to be a better ally.
I think that the best managers I've had have taken the time to build trust with me. Sorry, that's my phone, but yeah. So, and how do they build that trust? They're so caring for me as a person. And similarly to what Derek was saying, they ask, is there anything I can do? Or just let me know if there's anything I can do to make things easier. And really making me feel like I'm welcome and that I can bring something up. And part of that is there are things, so this might surprise some people, but I tend to only ask for things if I really need it. And I have been on so many calls where there are no captions. And I just, in the past, I just deal with it. And sometimes I ask, and then they set up captions on one call, but it's a regular meeting, and then there are no captions on the next call. And it's a burden for me to keep asking. So if there is a way for managers to invite feedback and give an opening for someone to voice a need or a desire for change, that can make a big difference.
Those are some great points. Thank you. Our next question is, what advice do you have for aspiring tech workers with disabilities looking to find a great employer, especially if they're new to the tech world? Ovidio, I would love to have you answer this one first.
So this is, my answer is two parts. The first part is not so much advice, but more of just like an affirmation. You belong here, right? There is a place for you here and in this space. You belong here. I volunteer with an organization called Hack Diversity here in Boston. And they work, their work is about bringing people with the underrepresented minorities into tech. And one of the things that I've learned from them is it's about relationships with those companies, with those employers, especially as a new person. Boston is one of those similar to the Bay Area, where it's all about who you know to be able to get your foot in the door. And so it's I suck at networking, right? But networking is a really useful way to do it, and especially I've been to networking events since the pandemic started, and it's been significantly easier because being remote allows me to have control over the space. Whereas if it was in person, I probably wouldn't go because I have no control, right? And so I think that would be my advice is like, you know, first and foremost, know that you belong here, and secondly, try and get to know other people. There are many organizations and places that you can jump in and just have conversations, right? Just very low stakes, not like, hey, you work at Google, can I have a job at Google? Or, you know, and just kind of just low stakes and let people get to know you, because that helps a lot more than you would think it does.
I think the best advice that's going to come out of tonight is your quote, "You belong here." If anyone takes away one thing from tonight, please take away that you deserve to be wherever you want to be. And if that's the tech world, then you deserve to be there. Meena, I would love to know, what advice would you give to someone with a disability who wants to enter the tech world and might be new to it?
Sure, I think I want to echo what Ovidio said too. I think first of all, understand that you belong here for sure. I think the one of the most greatest advantage that I see as being a disabled software engineer is that I just have so many the more skills. I'm more patient, I'm more resilient. I don't give up that fast. So like, I think my disability it's just made me such a creative and courageous person. And back to the advice part, I think the tech ecosystem online, it is so helpful. Like, I'm a part of so many Facebook groups where they share so many job opportunities in the tech field. I'll make sure to post some of the other group links in the chat now. But I just feel there is a lot of like support to pursue the tech careers on social media. So I think just like finding these kind of groups, it can be very useful. And another thing which helped me was to go to conferences and just talk to companies on spot. One of the biggest, I don't think it's the biggest, but it's called the WR conference for computing. I met so many employers there, and I spoke to them about their job training requirements. So I think just trying to find a support group is very important.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we have time for one final question. So the last question is I would love to know how folks in the field advocate for new research and product design for better accessibility features and encourage tech companies to collaborate instead of compete. So we will start with you, Aubrie.
Thank you. I love that question so much, and I wish I had an easy answer for you. I think I may have seen the message in the chat about how difficult it is to get different pieces of technology to work together. So we are living in an age of AI and quantum computing. And I think of those areas as shiny objects. But I think we need the simple solutions just as much as we need the shiny objects. Sometimes we need the simple solutions even more than we need the shiny objects. And that is a mindset change that I would love tech companies and people in general to go through. Is a lamp. A lamp is not rocket science. Yet still, lamps are not everywhere that they should be. And similarly, it should not be rocket science to connect different pieces of hardware and software, but the way that edge computers work, it doesn't exist the way it should today. So how can we encourage tech companies to collaborate more and to have sustainable solutions? I wish I knew the answer. I think I always go back to storytelling. So a large part of the problem is that the people who can build solutions don't know about the problem. So how can we raise awareness of those problems? How can we paint the picture of the pain and motivate people to actually do something about it?
You said it wasn't an easy answer, but I think that was such a great answer. Thank you so much, Aubrie, just for sharing all of your insight. And I want to thank our entire panel for joining us, our entire audience for joining us. I want to toss it to each one of our panelists so they can tell you where you can keep up with them. You can follow them on social media, learn about any of their new projects. So Derek, I'm going to start with you. Tell everyone where they can find you real quick.
Yeah, I guess for like tech related stuff, it's mostly LinkedIn for me. So Derek Van Oss, you'll find a profile on there with the same name that's made for photography stuff that I do as well. I have a background in photography too, as a half-blind guy, who knew? But yeah, you'll see my name come up there. I am working on a new project that I'm not ready to put out into the world yet, and so I'm no longer at Deloitte like the marketing materials for this talk said, and my profile says that I still am. I'm kind of figuring out what's going on next, and so I need to figure out what I'm going to do about that. But hopefully there'll be something cool that I'm working on that I can get people here that we've talked to today and people that are watching, listening, involved in the future. So
We're excited to see what you got going on. And you can also catch up with Derek in the DLC. You can also catch up with Meena in the DLC. And Meena, let everyone know where else they can find you.
Sure. So I just posted my LinkedIn. It is linkedin.com/n/MEENA11. My Instagram, it is Instagram.com/disabilities in tech. So yeah, please feel free to follow me, and thank you so much for inviting me to this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Ovidio, let everyone know where they can find you.
So at the moment, it's just on LinkedIn. I have a podcast brainchild that I've been working on that hopefully comes out maybe at the beginning of next year, talking about disabilities in the workplace and it's how we navigate those. And so I'll probably update that on LinkedIn when, if and when it does come out. But yeah, mostly LinkedIn. I put that in the chat for people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Aubrie, I would love to know where everyone can find you and what you're working on next.
Yeah, thank you. I accidentally entered my Twitter while someone else was talking, so apologies for that. But my Twitter is in the chat, and I'm also going to put links to you in a lot of different links. What am I working on next? So many things. And I am very interested in disability and art. So I'm an artist at heart, and so if anyone's interested in art, let me know.
Oh, we are going to be getting connected after this because I'm a disabled artist too. Art activism is my favorite thing ever. So I will definitely be following you after this. And I just want to, while we have a few minutes left, I want to see if we have any final thoughts from our panelists, anything that you would like to say. You guys have the floor, just let it out.
I'll go. Well, yeah, I think this, like Ovi was saying, you belong here. And how do we get companies more involved and things like that as well is we have to speak up, we have to band together, we have to make a case for ourselves. I've had to do that so many times over my career where I'm literally the person that we're designing the product or service for. I'm literally that person that can't use it, like, and they're asking me to design it in a way that would make it unusable for myself. So I'm like, I can't, like, I'll design it that way, but we need to have an accessible option too. You know, I worked at Sony on PlayStation 4 when that came out years ago, and I got the job. They didn't know I was disabled. They didn't know that I didn't have left use of my left hand. And I wanted to be able, part of the job was using a PlayStation controller, which is designed for two hands. And video games are designed for people with two hands and all of their vision. And I said, I don't know, I can't use this controller. You know, and so, and I didn't like scream and yell at them about it. I said, I want to find a way that I can do the things that my coworkers are doing too, and then design for the stuff that the users that we're designing for can use it. And I had to like do a bunch of my own research and contacting people that had their projects out there where people have made one-handed video game controllers. And I ended up reaching out to a guy, his name's Ben Heckendorn, who that modifies video game consoles and controllers. He's like a retired electrical engineer, hardware guy, and in his spare time, he just modifies parts and makes. And he was making one-handed controllers for big game consoles. For one, he did for a guy that had, I think, had one of his arms amputated in a attack overseas in the military. When he came back, he couldn't play video games anymore, you know, and he's like, I think I could make a one-handed controller for you. And so I saw that video. So I reached out to the guy, said, well, that story is incredible. I don't have that kind of same story, but I work at Sony on PlayStation. I need a one-handed controller so I can do my job. And he made one for me. And then I showed it to my employer, you know, I showed it to Sony, my bosses, and they were like, this is incredible. Like, and then I was given so much more like we had no idea that this was a thing, that you needed that would be helpful, that there are people out there that need that kind of support, that use the system differently. So if that's something that you're interested in helping us with or want to be involved, then we're granting you the time and the resources to do it, you know. And I had to speak up. I had to like kind of create the case. Like Aubrie was saying, I had to tell that story. And then once I did, everybody was just like all in, like, we love it, you know, like, let us know how we can help. Well, what other things would you like us to help solve, you know? And then so that's kind of, I think, my biggest takeaway in my career in tech has been like, be the squeaky wheel, but not in a way that's like shaming employers for like, you're not doing enough, you know, like I'm not torch wielding when I bring things up. It's like, hey, I want to have a conversation about this thing. Like, I want to do better work. I want to do better work for people like me who we're designing for. How can I help? Here's some things that I've done to help myself. Maybe we can implement some new processes and solve some of these problems. And I think it'll, like Ovi also said, it will make things better for everybody. So that's my big spiel.
Definitely. And that was an amazing spiel to end on, because it's like the power of advocacy can't be unmatched. So if you see something that needs to be changed, that should be changed, that could be changed, why not try to change it? Our time together is nearing the end, but we can continue this conversation together in the Diversability Leadership Collective, where you can connect with our DLC members. Meena and Derek are members, as well as a variety of different leaders in the disability community. Joining the DLC is a small investment for a big future, giving you access to network opportunities like our community mixers. You get access to our Diversability Unplugged for free with your membership. And you also get access to master classes, curated press, speaking opportunities, job opportunities, and so much more. So join, get your first week free, and we hope to see you there and continue the conversation. Let us know on our Facebook communities what you liked about tonight, and we can't wait to hear from you guys. I hope everyone has a great night.
Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
all
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
See you, everybody.
Till next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight.